In the independence of South America, two men stood out for their prestige as undisputed leaders of the revolution: Don José de San Martín, originally from Argentina, and Simón Bolívar from Venezuela. Both leaders met for the first and last time in July of 1822 in the port of Guayaquil. The confidential nature of the topics they discussed and the absence of witnesses at the meeting left many questions that historiography has tried to answer. However, it is a historical event that is still being speculated about. According to reliable historical sources, today we will tell the truth about the famous meeting between the protagonists of the emancipation in the region. My name is Alejandro Andrade. This is the New Encyclopedia, and I invite you to follow us on our Instagram account. The state of independence by 1822 was absolutely favorable for Simón Bolívar. Since 1811, the young Caracas man had been rising to power amid the whirlwind of violence and anarchy that the region was plunged into because of the war. With burning will, the liberator managed to win several decisive battles for the fate of America. The victories of Boyacá, Carabobo, and Bomboná were still a fresh memory in his mind. Meanwhile, Antonio José de Sucre, a man he trusted completely, had also sealed another important victory against the Royalist army at the Battle of Pichincha. Emboldened by their feats, Sucre and Bolívar entered Quito in triumph and were cheered by the city's inhabitants in June of 1822. At that point, Don José de San Martín faced a tumultuous situation in Peru. Since September 1820, the Argentine general had been fighting to solidify the nation's independence. The enemy he was facing was the most powerful of all. The Peruvian Viceroyal Army, which had withdrawn intact and undefeated to the San Martín Mountains, proclaimed the independence of Peru in 1821. But almost the rest of the country was in the hands of the Royalists, and he barely governed a small portion of the territory as protector. Due to the prolongation of the war and the economic deterioration, political opposition to San Martín kept growing. The Peruvians denied him the military support he needed to end the war, and the financial burden caused by his idle army generated discontent. His health was also in a critical state. His addiction to opium had increased, as he used it as a painkiller to treat his tuberculosis. Meanwhile, his closest man, Bernardo de Monteagudo, who served as Minister of War, was hated by several influential men in the city of Lima, who soon began to conspire against him. In this situation, Don José de San Martín proposed a personal meeting to Simón Bolívar. Research conducted by the meticulous historian Vicente Lacuna suggests that the purpose of the protector's proposal was to reach Guayaquil before the liberator, to force the incorporation of this territory into Peru. It should be clarified that Guayaquil was a naval base, a shipbuilding center, a port of vital importance for trade, and a strategic point for war. In October 1820, the city proclaimed its independence and formed a governing board presided over by Joaquín de Olmedo. This board signed a regulation that established that Guayaquil would have the complete freedom to join the state that suited it best. Peru and Gran Colombia were disputing its sovereignty, and both San Martín and Simón Bolívar were fighting for it. By right, the city belonged to Gran Colombia, since it had been part of the Viceroyalty of New Granada since the founding of the Viceroyalty. And that's what the liberator showed, getting ahead of the protector. After his triumphant passage through Quito, Bolívar entered Guayaquil accompanied by an army of 1,500 men, and after several popular demonstrations of support. The liberator notified the government junta on July 13th that he was taking the people of Guayaquil under the protection of the Republic of Colombia, taking charge of the political and military command of the city and its province. Once the status of Guayaquil was resolved, Bolívar prepared to calmly await the arrival of San Martin. On July 25th, the Argentine ship anchored near the Puna Islands. The liberator's aides arrived to meet him, having been sent to invite the Argentine general to disembark on Gran Colombian territory. Protector expressed his gratitude for the invitation to Bolívar's envoys and informed them that he would come ashore the following day. On July 26th, when General San Martin finally disembarked in the city at 10 in the morning, he was received by the Liberator's Guard, which had formed. Honor Guard lined the street from the pier to the house designated by Bolívar for his guests' accommodation. The sound of war revels and the morning salutes from the port artillery mixed with the cheers of the crowd who watched in awe. The momentous embrace between both leaders. After their first meeting in front of the public, the two went to the visitors' residence, where they received a formal visit from the local authorities and the commanders of the Colombian army. The first ceremony lasted until noon. They agreed to meet again in the afternoon. Around 4 o'clock, San Martin arrived at the government house. Bolívar was waiting for him with his aides, who left the place as soon as the liberator ordered it. Countless speculations have been made about the topics they discussed, and the lack of third parties in the meetings has fueled the imagination of those who have tried to unravel the conference. Among those fantasies, we can include the popular belief that says the fate of America was decided at that meeting, or the mistaken version of some Argentine historians, which we will discuss later. However, as we have already explained, the questions left by this event have already been answered by historiography. Therefore, we will proceed to narrate some of the matters they did discuss. San Martin did not leave any account of the Guayaquil conference to posterity. Naturally, upon his return, he had to inform the cabinet in Lima about the topics they discussed, a report he delivered verbally. However, Bolívar was indeed obligated to write or dictate a report to the executive power of Gran Colombia, to the government of Quito, and privately to Vice President Santander, who at that time was his collaborator in the government during his absence. For this reason, there are 3 reports on the conference from Bolívar, dictated by himself on July 29, 1822. In these 3 documents, identical in substance, it is stated that the conference unfolded in the following manner. First, San Martin expressed to Simón Bolívar the feelings that motivated him to meet him, and then he showered him with praise and congratulated him for his admirable perseverance in the war. San Martin continued by clarifying to Simón Bolívar that he had nothing to say to the liberator about the affairs of Guayaquil, in which he had no reason to get involved, since the issue of its sovereignty had already been resolved. Likewise, the protector complained about the hardships of command and about his fellow soldiers. He shared with Simón Bolívar his idea of retiring to Mendoza after achieving the first victory without waiting for the end of the war. Regarding forms of government, San Martin stated that a democratic government was not the most suitable for Peru, and that a prince from Europe should come to rule the country. Bolívar insisted that neither Colombia nor America would benefit from European princes because they were different from our people. At all times, San Martin expressed himself in terms that made it clear he did not aspire to the throne. Since the border problem between Peru and Colombia was still unresolved, the protector offered the liberator to promote the settlement of the borders between the 2 countries in the Peruvian Congress. But since he was not in power, Bolívar did not think it appropriate to deal in depth with such a delicate matter at that time. On the other hand, although several incorrect versions claim otherwise, San Martin never formally spoke about the military aid he had requested in his letter to Sucre and that Colombia had offered. And regarding the Peru campaign, the protector stated that the royalists were less strong than he was, and that their leaders, although bold and enterprising, were not very terrible. Bolivar recommended to San Martin the ideas proposed in his last communication regarding the joint action of the deputies from Colombia, Peru, and Chile in their negotiations with the Spanish commissioners sent to Colombia to discuss peace with Spain. Both agreed on this point. San Martin declared that Buenos Aires is republican and unconquerable due to the spirit of its people in regards to the situation in his nation. And finally, in his position as protector of Peru, San Martin made it clear to Bolívar that he could ask Peru for anything he wanted. He would agree to everything, expecting reciprocity from Gran Colombia. Upon his return to Lima, the Argentine general was received in a situation that exhausted the few hopes he still had. During his absence, the military officer José de la Riva Guerrero and the clergyman Luna Pizarro, along with several important supporters in Lima, sent a manifesto to the acting president demanding the dismissal of Monteagudo. San Martin's right-hand man was removed from office, imprisoned, and exiled far from the country. Forced by the weakening of his position in Peru and convinced that only Bolívar could consolidate independence, San Martin decided to resign from command in September. He left Lima the same night he resigned and the next day set sail for Chile and later for Europe, where he would live until his death in 1850. The reasons for San Martin's resignation become more than clear when you analyze the state of Peruvian independence in 1822, and you consider the protector's tendency toward discouragement, whose health was also weakened. Well, even though the facts point to the contrary, some Argentine historians tried to explain San Martin's resignation with a legend fueled by an apocryphal letter published 22 years after the meeting by a Frenchman named Lafon. According to this letter, false and insidious, San Martin had offered Bolívar to serve in Peru under the orders of the Liberator. The apocryphal letter led several Argentine commentators to infer that, although San Martin humbly offered to serve under his orders, Bolívar rejected the offer, out of selfishness, ambition, and a desire to rule Peru alone. This version has also been supported by several anti-Bolivarian Peruvians. Just by asking some basic questions, you can uncover the falsehood of this version. How does it benefit San Martin's historical reputation to portray him as a man incapable of stepping aside? What right did the Argentine, as protector, have to offer the absolute command of Peru to the President of the Republic of Gran Colombia in an interview that wasn't even official? Isn't it a lack of respect for San Martin's prodigious military career to imagine him receiving orders like a subordinate and admitting the insidious letter as authentic? Wouldn't that hypothetical case have made Peru's delicate situation even more complicated? Finally, if San Martin himself admitted to his friend Tomás Guido that, I quote, "Bolívar and I cannot both be in Peru," how can it be understood that to Bolívar, the man who was supposedly blinded by ambition and selfishness, he said the opposite? These and many other pieces of evidence presented by meticulous Venezuelan historians reveal the deceptions behind this version, fabricated to make unfounded accusations against the Liberator and to erode his prestige. Therefore, all the conclusions drawn from this apocryphal letter, as well as the comments by Bartolomé de Mitre, Ricardo Rojas, or Colombres Marmol in their respective works, lack historical rigor. Thank you. The Guayaquil interview is, without a doubt, an episode of great symbolism in history. In it, the undisputed leaders of South American emancipation met for the first and last time. Two men whose personal and ideological differences emerged during the course of the conversation, never to meet again. It has been this symbolism that has prompted so many people to talk and debate about the topics they discussed. And knowing today with certainty what they talked about and what they didn't, it's not an exaggeration to say that the meeting lacked political and military importance. Because, first of all, the meeting between Bolívar and San Martin did not alter the status of Guayaquil, which had already been settled thanks to the liberators' boldness. Secondly, its brief duration barely allowed them to exchange very general ideas, and thirdly, neither of them was authorized to initiate or conclude any agreement. Perhaps for San Martín, already tired of public life, the meeting meant the last chapter of his career. But for Bolívar, who was about to reach the zenith of his glory, it was just another episode in his life. Thanks for watching this video. I invite you to follow us on our Instagram account, which you can find in the description, and to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any new releases.